Hello and welcome to This is Recruiting. If you're joining us for the first time, This is Recruiting is a webinar series that we at HackerEarth have created to bring in the best in the industry to tell you about their stories and give you some advice on the different recruiting challenges that they face today. If you are new to HackerEarth, we are basically matchmakers for developers and hiring managers. We deal with the entire cycle of tech recruiting, that is from your sourcing, your screening, interviewing, upskilling, and finally engaging as well. And we do this by leveraging our entire set of tools and offerings that we have. We have an assessment platform that does skill-first assessments, that helps you with your coding tests and make sure that you can ensure bias-free hiring as well as hiring only based on skills. We also have an incredible interviewing platform called Face Code, which allows you to do remote interviewing where you can talk to your developers as you're hiring them and evaluate their skills in real time without the need to use any other third-party platform. And finally, we also have hackathons and hiring challenges where you can invite different developers across the world to take part in challenges and assess them based on their skills, which ultimately leads to hiring. And then we also have engagement for the same thing. So you can always engage your internal employees as well as release new challenges for those developers to crack. If you'd like to know more about our offerings and about our company in general, you can visit hackerearth.com/recruit. It's there right at the end of the screen, and I've also put it in the chat box. But I don't want to take too much of your time, talking about our platform and everything like that. I want to really get into the topic that we have today, which is a super interesting topic, recruiting in the Metaverse. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have various questions about this because in the past webinars that we've conducted, there were quite a few people asking us, tell us about the Metaverse, tell us about how recruiters are dealing with it. What are the different challenges that we can foresee? And naturally, I had to reach out to people who are very skilled in this. And though Randy has told me repeatedly not to call anyone an expert because this is a very new topic and everyone's still kind of figuring themselves out. But I got in two of the best people I think would be able to help you with dealing with all these challenges in recruiting in the Metaverse. So we have two exciting panelists, and this is the first time in the series that we have two panelists who are joining us. So I'm super excited to get it started, and I'm going to hand it off first to Erin Boose, who is the Global Talent Lead at Coindesk. Erin, can you introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Of course, Rebecca. Thank you for the invite. As Rebecca was saying, my name is Erin. I run Global Talent at Coindesk. We aim to be the most trusted advisor for information on the global crypto and Web3 economy. We actually had the pleasure of utilizing HackerEarth for a project we did for a hackathon in our consensus. Sorry, just lost my train of thought. At our consensus in Austin, and it was a great success. So thank you.
That's awesome to hear. And thank you so much, Erin, for being here today. It's been a long ride with Erin. I'd say I initially called her for a webinar much in advance. And then, because of different reasons, we couldn't work it out. So I'm happy that, you got to come to this one and for probably the most interesting topic that we have right now. So thank you so much for being here. Next, I'm going to hand it over to Randy. So Randy, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yes, and also thanks for having me. I'm the lead recruiter and people ops for Dripshop.live. We're a live streaming app where sellers can make a living in e-commerce selling the collectibles that they love, and buyers have an opportunity to have a very safe and secure place to buy those products. And we're very excited to be here. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much, Randy. Thank you for being here. So we're going to jump into the questions that we have planned for today. And as always, if you have any question during the discussion, please put it into the Q&A box on the Zoom panel right there. We will get to it either during the course of the webinar, or we will save it right at the end for the final Q&A. So we're going to talk about, since we're talking about the metaverse, naturally, the first question on everyone's mind is, what is the metaverse and who is building it? So Randy, can you please start us off?
Sure. I guess there's probably about 100 different definitions because it's so new. I sort of remember it as like when AI first came out and everybody's like, this is what I think it is. This is what I think it is. To me, what it is it's a network of 3D virtual spaces that allow users to explore and interact in real time. And that's what I see it as at this point, where it's basically the virtual world simulation in a lot of cases of the physical world, but also if you see in gaming and such, a lot of that does have just up to your own imagination.
And I think it's also, given that, it's so new and there are so many new things coming out right now. Erin, you just touched upon a lot of what Coindesk is doing with, crypto and Web3, and there's still so much new technology that's out there. What do you think is so great about the metaverse, and why is it something that we should be looking at right now?
Sure. I think one of the most important things to note about the quote unquote metaverse is the decentralization component of it. So when we think of Meta, formerly Facebook, there is the sandbox right now, heavily a gaming platform where you can build an avatar. Decentraland, the same thing. There's random events going on every day there, and you can join them. But in terms of building, really any human or brand can build a product that has sort of a metaverse component. But there's lots of organizations that are contributing to the full concept, right? So avatars are being built by Ready Player Me. Oculus and Apple are building hardware to contribute to the growth of the metaverse. Blockchain companies, often all of your decentralized things are being built on a blockchain. OpenSea, they have a marketplace for NFTs where then you can move, hopefully at some point, move your NFT from one metaverse to the other. And I think that's an important point to make. Not all of the metaverses are connected at this time. I think maybe in the future they will be, and you will be able to seamlessly move from product to product. But at this point, they are very segmented.
Okay, that's very interesting. I had no idea that it wasn't all connected. I thought, it was just one large open space and people could just come in and it was just a complete verse on its own. But yeah, that's really interesting to know. I had no idea, but that's just me. I'm not into any of this. I'm just a marketer here. So yeah, thank you. And let's get into the next one. So when it comes to recruiting, I think we've all seen a couple of different events itself that are happening in the metaverse. We've seen, different gaming things that are happening. We see, a lot of other socializing events that are happening. But I think with the recruitment aspect, it's still kind of new. It's still being developed. There are people who are having smaller recruitment events, hiring events, and, they're smaller and fewer spaced. But what's been your experience so far with recruitment events? Have you seen them? Have you attended them? And, as say an active participant or even a third-party observer. So Erin, why don't you, lead us into that?
Sure. I've been researching a lot of these products and what's been happening out in the marketplace. I think there are organizations like Accenture that have done a really great job. They built their own CareerVerse, and it enabled attendees to interact with products that they've been working on and have conversations with leaders from Google and SAP. So there's a lot that can be done. What I think is sort of limiting at this point is if you are doing a fully VR experience, the interaction and the human sort of mannerisms, as I move my hands right now, some of those things are still going to be really lacking until we get to a point where it feels more realistic. At this point, it's still an avatar. So, as my mouth moves, my avatar is probably less facially aware of what's going on. You don't have reactions. You don't have people saying, ooh, or ah, it really sort of has a limiting factor in terms of the engagement at this point. But you can still create simulations and environments where people can learn about your products and services, and have touch screens and interactive visuals that can be really informative for career seekers.
Okay, that's very cool. And I think you mentioned earlier in one of our conversations as well that your best friend works at Meta, right? And that's why you have like a good experience or understanding about like the sort of things there. So have you attended any of the Meta events as well?
Yeah. So some of what's going on there has been really behind closed doors. We all know that Meta has launched their own inner office virtual experiences that have been quite successful. I think you're going to continue to see growth around that. I'm sure Meta would like to see, everyone going to their metaverse only. I think what's going to be interesting is from a ads point of view. So how brands are going to be capturing attention within the metaverse. Actually, one thing that I often think about that I'm hopeful that we're going to see this holiday season, I really love gift guides, the top 50 gifts for gamers or what have you. Right. I'm hoping we'll see something like that in a metaverse version, or, maybe Saks will create something experiential like that. So you're not just flipping through a catalog. Maybe there's a way where you get to see a 3D spin of the product, or you can try it on your own avatar.
Yeah, I think that would be incredibly cool. I would definitely buy things that way. Randy, let's move on to you. Let's discuss the recruitment events that you've seen so far in terms of job fairs or career courses and other things like that.
Yeah, to me so far, I personally won't attend them if they're just virtual realities, and I have obviously my own Oculus headset, but I kind of have an issue when there's an access problem. Most of the world doesn't have access to those because of financial reasons or whatever that case may be. So because of that, they're kind of held away from those types of events. But I've definitely been in events where they've had mobile and desktop. And to me, just as Erin mentioned, it still feels like to me a third-party avatar that turns into a Zoom call. So it hasn't quite got there. There actually is technology that can be utilized. If you look at Fortnite, they've already built environments where they're having concerts, and these environments where people are interacting. They have these things called haptic where you can feel the movements and things that are going on and the sounds that are around you. They actually had 11 million people, even though it's broken into instances because you can't really have that many people in one reel, you couldn't even tell. So I really believe that once we get the technology to the level where we can actually have a real interaction more on the phone and desktop, I think that's when I'm going to really engage a lot more from that angle.
And what would be your advice to people or companies that are trying to make like a first move into it? And of course, this is something we will also cover a little later on. But because you mentioned, right, that it's almost like, a mix of trying to be virtual reality, but ends up being something like a Zoom call. Would you think, what would be your opinion on, starting out like that? Would it be beneficial to talent teams to get their foot into the game just by starting with these smaller events, or, where they're just including like a couple of elements? Or do you think it's better if people just wait, till everyone has access to the hardware or the right tools?
Well, if you look at places like Decentraland, there already is these capabilities where mobile WebGL does allow quite a bit of interaction. But when you think about it, it's not really real yet. But what you can do is begin very small. What I would suggest is to first get a consultant, start educating yourself truly on what is the environment. And then I would start with a small team that specializes just in Metaverse. And that way, they already have 29 billion in people working in the Metaverse alone. So if you're going after those folks, it doesn't really depreciate the access because most of them are in the gaming and those areas. So it gives you an opportunity to learn. It gives you an opportunity to begin the recruiting process in that marketplace. So I would get a specialized small team that also allows you to validate and test ideas. So that's how I would first begin, with a real small team of people that kind of have this, because there's also going to be a lot of training you're going to need. As Erin mentioned, marketing is going to be completely different. You're going to need creators on that team. The whole world is going to change of the way that we do recruitment marketing. And I guess we'll get into that in a little bit, but I would suggest starting out with a real small team, as I said, and then really expanding from there, but actually validate, test, and don't just pick something just because of the heck of it, right? I saw a lot of people doing that back in the AI day, just wanted to be in. So I would really concentrate on that specific gaming area and AR, VR types, so it really fits it.
So on that subject of getting started and how teams would start, say we have the infrastructure that's present right now, and we are slowly moving into conducting interviews and job interviews only on the Metaverse. Can you give us a glimpse of what that would look like from the perspective of a hiring manager? How should they approach it, and what's something that they should keep in mind? Randy, let's start with you there.
Can you restate that question?
So what can we expect when starting out with the job interview in the Metaverse? How can talent teams approach it? And what is something they should keep in mind while conducting job interviews in the Metaverse? Given that, we have, or hypothetically that we have the infrastructure available right now, and that the adoption is also there, just to give us a glimpse of what that could look like.
Sure. Here's what I imagine. I imagine it starts out with your MetaHuman HR representative that's going to do probably the initial screening, and then give a lot of information about the company, because I've already have this type of technology we're utilizing where in the interactions, the people that we've tested against enjoyed speaking to the human avatar about certain things. They felt very uncomfortable talking to about their money, right? About certain benefits, but they felt very comfortable talking to the avatar about that type. So I think the initial screen would be done by that. Then the next interview, I believe, would then be done by a simulation of the hiring manager and team. And what they would do is they could walk that person through the values, the culture, because it's a subculture in each little part of a company, right? Because you're the hiring manager of your team. So they can actually see you in the Metaverse. Actually, you can work. You can have that person try out some of the work and really get involved in it, because it's a two-way street now. That person gets to say, hey, I'm really kind of into this. This is fun. This is the way the team works. And the team gets to see you from that interaction on how well you work and how well you do it. So instead of these basic assessments, it'll actually be sort of a real life environment that you can jump into. And then I think after those areas are covered, we then would move into more of the live interviews, where you would basically be in a virtual room with the manager looking at each other, because they're more realistic, having that real world kind of a conversation, almost as if you would do it through Zoom today. That's sort of what I visualize.
And Erin, could you add on to that? Like, from your perspective, what do you think a job interview would probably look like?
Of course, I think some of what Randy said is absolutely true. I also think there's an ability to add sort of gamification elements that could make the interview process just simply more engaging. We hire, obviously, a lot of writers. That is the bulk of our organization right now. As it stands right now, we'll send them, a writing test and say, complete this over, 72 hours or what have you. In the future, we could be able to show someone a video and say, ingest as much as you can about a subject matter you don't know about. Let them type out 200 words and give you back something that, hopefully would be publishable publish appropriate. It would run through a scan. You'd know if it was grammatically correct, spelling, etc. And you can essentially have something that a writing test that generally has taken 2 days that might take 4 minutes or 5 minutes.
And do you think that, from, say, a person who is getting recruited from the talent perspective, do you think it would be something, Randy, you already touched upon this, that it's a lot more comfortable for people to discuss sensitive matters like pay and compensation with, say, like an avatar instead of talking to people in person? So we had a pretty interesting webinar, which we did a few months ago on neurodiverse hiring. And I think just, listening to you talking about that, I think this would be really helpful for neurodiverse people who are not always good in terms of their soft skills. And when it comes to job interviews, this is probably an area where it would benefit them. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on the same thing. Randy or Erin, feel free to start us off there.
I'd be happy to jump in. I think 100%. I think there's more than just neurodiversity issues that are going to be better. I think that issues where people feel uncomfortable in a lot of different bias is going to be better, because you can be whoever you want in the metaverse, right? And so it's very hard to judge someone when you're all just a bunch of avatars that can become anybody who you want to be. But from a neurodiversity perspective, yes, because they don't want to be rushed. They have struggles when they have to be pushed into certain specifics. So when you allow them to do it at their own pace and in their own comfort, you can find out that some of them most of them are super smart. They just haven't been given the proper opportunity. So I'm 100% behind what you're saying.
That's great. Erin, anything to add to that?
Yeah, the only thing that I would say about the avatar component is, I guess, as verification and authentication of avatars becomes more prevalent and something that we can do on a widespread scale, I just worry about in terms of hiring, like, what sort of legal problems might come into play if avatars are not authenticated. Just to play devil's advocate of something that could come up.
It's really interesting that you brought that point up, because it goes directly into our next question, which are issues that can arise with metaverse recruiting. We have discussed and touched upon things like hardware issues, the issue of accessibility, people always not being able to afford the right headsets or the virtual reality tools, or even being in a company that cannot possibly afford all of this at that point. But what are other issues that you can foresee in when it comes to metaverse recruiting? And you just mentioned legal issues and issues with that. Like, could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, I think about a couple of things. One, just security. Do we have the infrastructure to support interviewing like this? I've seen a lot advertised about recruiting fraud lately, and that really concerns me. I think cost of building these products. I would like to think I'd be able to build these costs into my my next year, or my 3 to 4 years out, but I don't know. Also thinking about mass adoption, it seems like each metaverse has a great interest, but if there are maybe you're expanding to other parts of the world that it hasn't quite gotten there. So how do you catch them up for maybe something that we're doing in the States and still being able to give them the same experience? I think about GDPR compliance. Will this be compliance by a fingerprint instead of someone saying, yes, I agree to the GDPR? I don't know. I think it remains to be seen. At one point, internet law was very new. And now I think you're going to see the next phase of metaverse law.
Randy, would you like to add to that?
Oh, yeah. I think she touched upon interoperability. That's one of the biggest issues we're going to face. Anybody not understanding what that means is that everybody right now, if you have an iPhone, you're not able to use that avatar on an Android, and vice versa, and anything else. And if you want to be a metaverse where it's supposed to be free flowing across the world, it's going to be very difficult when you can't get from one piece of land to the other. Even as much as you can't bring your avatar across, you can't even wear the same digital clothes. So there's going to be a lot of these issues that we're going to have to face. I think another one she touched upon with GDPR is basically who owns the data in an area where it's either on a blockchain network or it's across a bunch of different companies. Which one of the companies may own, or does everybody co-own, or is it only the ownership of the candidate at that point? So I think that's a bigger, broader scope that we're going to face, and access is definitely an issue. One thing to consider that for the first time, headsets from Oculus outweighed and outpurchased the Xbox. So there are some good shining lights on that. And when you're talking about avatars, and to bring it to forward, right now you can go very cheap if you just start out with a non-meta human style with just something that may be from like an AWS stock brand where there wouldn't be any kind of issues that you face, just to start to get used to doing these things and be able to conversate and sort of move in those types of directions. Yeah, you don't want to jump in head first. As I mentioned, you want to slowly sort of gain those types of things. There's actually, for the first time, I think I wrote down, Microsoft, Epic Games, Samsung, NVIDIA, they formed the first ever world standards for the metaverse. They call it the MSF, Metaverse Standards Forum. And it's the first one of its kind. But it also brings up another issue. And that issue is literally a big issue because we're moving to what they call a stake versus of work, right? A statement of work is being moved. And what's going to happen is staking is based upon if you put 32 ETH in, you become a staker, which gives you a vote. But some of the bigger, what they call whales out there, have a lot of money. These big companies, they're going to have their own economy. They're going to have their own ways of doing things. How is the government going to even control these types of environments when they become this big and they don't need the US dollar or the euro at that point because they are their own? So there's a lot of issues that are wrapped around that. And as you see this one group become an MSF, are there going to be other groups that band together as their group and then this group, and then only the whales control the environment? So that's one of the things that I'm looking at as a big concern.
All incredibly valid concerns. I think as we go into it deeper, there are probably a lot of other things also that will arise. I think one interesting thing that I read about quite recently is given that it is the metaverse and nobody knows who's who, it can also open people up to being sexually harassed again via avatars or even verbally abused and things like that. Cyberbullying itself is something that can become quite rampant. And I thought that was, completely new problem that I did not think would arise from there. So it's pretty interesting to see that too. I'm just going to open it up for questions right now because we have one question here pertaining to this particular thing that we're talking about. So it's from Beatrice, who has said, considering the hiring process, how could we make sure we are actually hiring the person we interviewed in the metaverse, since they can behave whichever way they want? So I'm going to first hand it over to you, Erin, to give us like a little bit about that. And then Randy, you can add.
Yes. So Beatrice, that goes back to the authentication of avatars. Right now, if you go to Decentraland or the Sandbox, you can create an avatar. You don't have to connect it to anything to authenticate yourself. So that is one problem, that if organizations do move to this type of hiring, it's something that we are going to have to figure out at what stage of the process are we able to authenticate someone. And if we're not doing it through their avatar, what method would we use? And I think that, there could always be the old fashioned way, just via Zoom. And then, hopefully, maybe someone, with some software engineering would be able to help us figure out some of those issues as well. And again, I mentioned legal, I'm sure they're going to have something to say about how all this is done. But, if we were to authenticate, right, perhaps it's something just through a regular job application that we're able to recognize, the information they've put in, and then it matches with their avatar, with their LinkedIn, with all of their other socials, and be able to come back and sort of maybe some, futuristic quick background check. Again, that's just off the top of my head. Randy, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that you were on the right track. I think what's going to happen is that each individual is going to own their own data, and that data is going to be created into an NFT because you want to incentivize them to allow you to have their data. And by doing so, it then puts a contract onto the blockchain, and now it's verifiable. So I think that once we move towards that model, it'll start to verify, and background checks would actually be a more preferable, which means that applicant could get a higher incentivized NFT purchase, if you will, if they had backgrounds attached to that non-fungible token. So now you have not only the background checks, which are forever, you'll be able to tell from that point on that this person did work there, they did do this. The one thing that I'm a little wondering about is that a lot of companies now, you're not even allowed to do anything except send them to HR, and all they can do is say that they only work there. That's the only thing you can say. So one of the things I'm going to try to understand and sort of, try to figure out is, how do they do these background checks? Or because it is their own data, they then cannot stop them from being able to advocate in someone's behalf because they're not going to be controlling these issues. There's going to be fun little things, like even you were talking about the avatars is, do you have one avatar that you use for interviews that's dressed up nicely, and one that you use for going out at night and hanging out in Fortnite, having a big bunch of fun? And interestingly, we might also have issues that go along with what is the attire that your avatar can wear at work when it's in the virtual world. So there's actually more questions than answers right now, Rebecca and Erin, that I could see. But that would be my take on that.
I think it's great to start off with questions, because that's how you get to where you want to go. I'm always a big fan of asking the right questions. And I think given that, we also have a lot of people who are asking a lot of questions right now on the Q&A
right.
panel. So I'm going to take one more question now before we move on to the next one. Which platforms exist now for recruiters and candidates in the metaverse? So we have Eve, who has asked us that question. Randy, maybe you can start off with that.
Sure. If you really go into the straightforward, there's plenty of startups that really have like virtual rooms they've built. But if you want to go to the big players, Microsoft has a play, Meta has a play. And those are probably your biggest, more standardized plays that are out there. Fortnite is a great place that you wouldn't even think about that could become a great place. I think that at some point, the Discord community is going to want to take us towards that direction, which if we're really looking at the evolution and we're building stuff for the next 4 to 5 years, this is going to be the generation that we're going to be wanting to recruit. So I think that we want to look towards those types of avenues. But those are the big players.
Erin, anything to add to that?
As Randy said, there's so many startups out there. I saw one earlier, Gather for team meetings and conferences. It's really realistic looking. They have, widespread event spaces, and then they have smaller sort of breakout rooms that look really interesting. I've seen a product, Tailspin, that aims to educate on sort of soft skills building, that is also really realistic looking. There's really no limit to what can be done. I just read actually a week ago that Walmart had used a product called Striver for employee training. That again, it looked as if the person was in the store. So I think we're at a time when if somebody can think about it and dream it up, it can really be built. Obviously, just thinking about the limitations of money and who the product is used for. But if you just Google, any products to help HR with VR, AR, there's a ton that come up.
Yeah, I can tell you right now, I can vouch for Gather because at Dripshop.live, we have our meetings during the day in the Drip Palace in Gathertown. So we are using that technology as we speak, and it's really cool. You can throw confetti at people when they did something cool, and it makes a lot more fun. So just thought I'd bring that in, that's really something that Drip is using as we speak, and it does make a difference. It just creates this different vibe than just the standard Zoom. So I would definitely recommend looking into these types of technologies.
Awesome. So we're going to move on to the next question that we have. Building off of what you said, Erin, about just Googling things about HR help in VR and AR and how to educate people in it and the resources that you've seen so far. What would be your advice to talent acquisition teams about them learning about the metaverse and what resources can they use there?
I think if you want to realistically think about bringing in a product to your organization, you first have to think about what makes sense for your brand. But even before that, if you want to educate yourself and sort of learn about what's available, I'm not embarrassed to say, I learned a lot about the metaverse through playing Minecraft with my boyfriend's 8-year-old son. It gives you a realistic understanding of how these products actually work. So as an example, Microsoft owns Minecraft. However, the different realms are governed by different protocols. So you have to build and work within that protocol of each realm. And I think it gives you, even as an adult, sort of a basic understanding. Okay, we can't build government buildings in this realm or whatever, anyone has set up. And I think it's really interesting. Again, you'll sort of get to know, movement and how it's sort of less human feeling. But it's a really great educator just to get yourself started. I myself am joining Decentraland. They have a US Open Grey Goose event today. Cool. The US Open kicks off today in New York. That I think that's an easy way to sort of learn how some of these products interact. Also, the organization upon organization has provided white papers. Chain Analysis put out like 100-page white paper a few weeks ago that's really interesting. I think what Randy was just mentioning, Metaverse Standards Forum, they just kicked off a newsletter. They just really formed last month or the month before. So you're getting up to the minute information about what those groups are talking about. And I think, right, anything can be Googled. So if you want to educate yourself, just start Googling and you'll go down a rabbit hole of education.
Randy, anything to add to that?
Oh, it's all great information. YouTube's just a plethora of information. These kinds of shows are a great way to look into other viewpoints. I honestly believe that you need to start to create your own learning and development center. Starting having a few consultants come in and start to educate and to build your own intellectual property from the very get-go. And that's how it starts to begin. That would be my biggest advice, is to, like Erin said, get your feet wet. I like Fortnite, to be honest with you. You can dive in there because they've got it. Decentraland's pretty cool. Checking these places out, having a blast, learning about it is one thing you're going to find out. But at the same time, you need experts that can kind of guide you and sort of say, hey, we've already tripped over all these mistakes. We've already been down these rabbit holes. We can kind of guide you in the right direction, and they can also create information for you and learning abilities for you and really kickstart your company. Because I can tell you that there's already thousands of companies just in Dubai. There's over 1,000 companies now in Web3. If you do not take this step forward, you're going to be left behind. That's what I'm going to express to everybody out there. So definitely it's worth getting started and just putting that best foot forward and getting a few experts to get you going.
Awesome. I think that's very solid advice. And I hope everyone in our audience right now is, I mean, I'm pretty sure people are going to get started with that, because we have quite a few attendees on this webinar today itself. So that at least shows, the interest in learning about the metaverse, about recruiting as well. On that note, I'm going to open it out now to questions from our audience. And we have quite a few questions coming in already. First, I'm going to, direct this to the both of you again. It's an anonymous question that's come in. Have you tried Metaverse recruitment by the steps that you've mentioned? If yes, how many times? And was it successful or useful? If no, when are you going to do it in the future? So let's start off with Erin.
I'm actually still developing my strategy, but I see the greatest value for Coindesk. We have a large group of interns that we hire pretty regularly. I think I'd like to see my biggest test within them, right? They're the age group that I want to get their feedback, as they are going to be the future of Web3 and crypto. But also it gives you the opportunity where there's a lot of participants at once, whereas most of the time I just have one person to fill one job. But if I can get 10 to 20 interns to give me feedback on a process, especially with a new product like Gather or one of these other platforms, I really believe that's how I'm going to utilize it first.
Randy, coming to you, and I think you can also talk a little bit about, the different projects that you're working on, your companies as well, when it comes to recruitment.
Yeah, one of them, we're actually taking it to job description level. What we're doing is, let's say you apply on LinkedIn, instead of coming to a flat page or a flat screen or just reading a job description, the fall off rate, we all know, is at least 80% based on Glassdoor. What I'm doing is what I've designed, and we've already tested it. Yes, we've used it in the real world so far, that you come to an interactive experience directly from the apply. And now you can talk to the avatar, which isn't the kind that would look like me. So you wouldn't be worried if it was the right or wrong, but it gives them a ton of information about the company, and it gives them a ton of information about that specific job opening, which the data suggests that people fall off because, one, it takes too long, or two, it's just too much information, and it's not good information, right? It's not directed at what they need to know. So giving them an interactive space where they can kind of just get into that specific opportunity, they can get into it. The avatar actually does like a little bit of an interview, but it's very engaging, and just chats with them, and all that data is captured, all that's captured for the person to be able to review. And we recorded asking them questions about how did they enjoy did they not enjoy? There might have been a little bias because they are looking for a job, but in essence, it was ringing out that they liked the ability to take their own time. They liked the ability to be able to ask questions that they would feel a little uncomfortable with. And they really felt like they knew that this was a good opportunity for them because they saw the culture. They saw a lot of other details that they were able to really realize it was right or wrong. So by the time it now gets to the recruitment team, this person wants the job and they're qualified for the job. So when you're reaching out to these people, it's a much warmer lead with a good interaction that way. So that's some of what we've used. My future, as you know, Rebecca, is I'm trying desperately to unlock jobs for people with heavy disabilities. Ones that can't speak on their own, and ones that are enabled to move around on their own. And thanks for allowing me a little bit of this platform. So what I've designed is a technology that can think, and you can speak through the phone, giving them the ability to let their caregiver know that they're hungry. Basic daily life things. And our next step is the technology that we built for the recruiting. We're going to make it so they can actually become recruiters. And that's what we're working towards, so we can try to get them a job so they actually have a feeling of worth and not have to live off their government, which takes away their feeling of worth. So that's one of our big passions that I'm working on this as my side project. And thanks for giving me that platform to just mention that.
Yeah, of course. I think, when you spoke to me about it earlier, I was super intrigued about the whole thing, especially, the story that you told me behind the whole thing. It was really interesting to see what you're working on. And yeah, anyone in our audience right now, you can always reach out to Randy on LinkedIn. He's super responsive there if you'd like to know more about what he's working on and the stuff that he's right now doing both in the recruiting world as well as outside. Moving on to the next question. Given the lack of clarity about legalities, how would we look at compensation given that avatars could be from anywhere in the world? So, Randy, why don't we start with you about that? We did cover a little bit about this, but let's go into some more details.
Sorry, can you restate that question?
Yep. The question is, given the lack of clarity about legalities, how would we look at compensation given that avatars could be from anywhere in the world?
In my opinion, right now, at the end of the day, you're going to end up speaking to a human, and you're going to end up being, if it's a technical person being teched out by the technical team, you're going to be working alongside these types of people in there. So the bar should be set based on that. I don't even ask people what they were making. I know a lot of states don't allow you, but I figured that they're supposed to be what they're truly worth. So I think that if we need to be able to assess what they're truly worth. So I think when you're saying, if their question is they're only based upon an avatar, I think that at this time in our world, like Erin had said earlier, you can't trust that. You have to take it to the next step, do background checks, and do legitimate screening from a human side to make those decisions.
Erin, anything to add to that? You did cover this a little earlier again.
Yeah, I would just say that, within HR, we're still going to have limitations, right? There's still going to be some time when a hiring manager is like, oh, I only want someone on East Coast time, based on preference and based on their team's working style. Or, I can only have someone based in the UK because we want them to be traveling to X amount of places. Or you're still going to notice that job descriptions are still going to have some limitations. And I would say pay attention to those. There are a lot of organizations that are going fully remote. And say you can work anywhere, but there still are some that are abiding and have tax and location limitations that they need to adhere to.
Awesome. On the subject of taxes, so someone has asked us, Pradeep, they said, will the government enter into this, and will they be paying taxes directly to the government based on the assets we own? Okay, so the assets mentioned here are assets to attend different interviews in the metaverse. So I'm going to just state that question again because it's a two-part question. How exactly do you attend interviews in the metaverse? Is it the same like virtual interviews these days, or should we own something in the virtual world, such as a site, different currencies, etc.? So let's discuss that. Erin, you can go ahead.
Sure. As we've been saying, there's multiple ways to get into a metaverse type product. It should be, hopefully most organizations are going to make it most accessible. So you won't have to have extra hardware or anything special to be able to attend the interview. But you should be able to always check and see, like, can I go from mobile or from the web or what have you. Everyone should always send you instructions on how they want you to join. But honestly, like, I've gone so far as to create an interview guide, step by step, how to check your Wi-Fi speed, how to download Zoom or any of these tools. So you're going to continue to see more and more of that, and it's going to be specific based on whatever product the organization wants to utilize.
Randy, do you have anything to add to that?
I think that pretty much sums up, because right now, if you're using a mobile, I would still suggest moving towards a Zoom or Team. I think you're still looking at a third-party avatar when you're looking through a phone. So it gets to be, I would consider, kind of weird trying to push an interview through in that direction. As far as taxing, when someone does begin working, you have Deal, Gusto, you have these companies out there that are geared for global payment. And so it's very easy now to pay people. When it comes to the, as I mentioned, for crypto, that's a whole nother question when it comes to, is the government going to be able to tax? They're sure going to try, and they're sure trying right now. They just can't wrap their head around it right now. But believe you me, if there's a way to tax, they will. But as these economies grow, as I said earlier, they can grow beyond a government at this point from a global perspective. So if I'm a global metaverse, where's the line in the sand that one country feels that they own this part of the metaverse? So it's going to be tricky on how that all plays out.
Yeah, but I think, like you also said, we're still learning. There are more questions than answers at this point. And yeah, it will be very interesting to see, looking back on this webinar a few months or even years from now, like how much of it in terms of our predictions did fall into place, and how things are progressing. Because like you said, crypto was also a huge thing, is still a huge thing, but there was, there are ups and downs there as well. And people were, at the time when it was introduced, I think it was just as new a concept as the whole metaverse is right now. We have a couple more questions. One more that's been asked by Morgan. Is it not going to create disparities between people that can afford a great technological equipment, a headset, computer, etc., versus people that cannot? Or between people that can afford great virtual outfits or accessories versus people that only have a basic outfit, etc.? So I think this is, again, something that both of you had covered a little bit about accessibility in general and how that would create different issues, and how we are looking towards, an environment where things are more accessible. But is there anything that, you'd like to add about it, especially with regards to virtual outfits and accessories and things like that?
I could start, I guess.
Go ahead.
We absolutely are going to run into that issue. You have an ETH that's going to be $60,000 for one ETH, right? And you have NFTs that are going to go for 0.05 ETH, for just $10. To some people, that's a lot of money just for the shirt on an avatar. I think that, like most things, that the amount of NFTs, the amount of things that we have, will definitely drive the difference, and the prices will drop just like everything else does. So I think through time it will be, but it is something that is going to be a consideration. Just like right now, it's $500-600 for a really good headset. Not a lot of people can afford that. Internally, companies can, in a lot of cases, where they can do a lot of internal things where they can really take advantage of it. But from an external, that's definitely an issue.
Erin, anything to add to that?
Yes, thank you. I would just add that I had mentioned before Minecraft. Again, this is a product that's really low tech, and even older desktops can access it because there's no sort of virtual reality or AR or holograms or anything crazy that is involved with the product, and it's still extremely popular. So we can create products that are accessible. But again, it's just thinking about what those products look like. Can we finance the cost, and will they be widely adopted?
Yeah,
I think another one to look at is Spatial. Spatial's, I have my NFTs on Spatial. I have my gallery there. And over the phone, it's still really good. But the challenge is a lot of the avatars that you're looking for with the clothes and the NFTs that go on them aren't quite being sold at the cheap natures of that yet. So that's sort of the challenge.
Okay, we have just enough time for one other question and another anonymous question that's come in here, which is a very HR question. How can you control last minute backups when it comes to, I'm guessing this is from a job interview perspective or a recruitment perspective in general. Very HR question here. So
I can take this.
Go ahead.
I can tell you, I can't control it. I get ghosted. People put time on my Calendly all the time. I think that there's good engagement. They write and say they're excited, and then just don't show up. I'm really not sure how to control it. But as a recruiter, I'm used to rejection. So, it doesn't really bother me. But I actually firmly am a person that doesn't believe in ghosting. Like, it is my number one mantra in life. So I don't know how to control it, but it happens to me all the time. So it's not just you, Anonymous.
Randy, anything to add to that?
Well, I think Erin said it quite well. But I think that what I've done is use like WhatsApp and send reminders that say, please confirm. And I do a reconfirm again 1 hour before the interview. I do it the day before and I have them actually have an action where they have to commit and say, yes, I'm going to be there. I am confirming. And I still have them, right? But I've reduced it considerably by utilizing a platform like that to just re-engage and keep them feeling like that. Because in a lot of cases, they may just got an offer and they're like just going to drop it off, but they're like, okay, I'll go ahead. And in a lot of cases, once they do the interview, they're like, you know what? I do like this company. Maybe I'll hold off that other offer and try to get myself through the process. So I think a lot of times it's something of that nature. And I think we need to just keep them engaged and keep reminding them throughout the process is the best you can do.
Yeah, definitely. And on the same subject, if you're looking to, get tips on post-offer engagement and things like that, we actually did a webinar about it a couple of months ago, not related to the metaverse, disclaimer there, but about post-offer engagement in general. And anyone like Anonymous, if you'd like to check it out, you can go ahead to our webinars tab on HackerEarth's main webpage and you can find it there. On that, I think we are done. There is one more question. I will just do one more because I think there are quite a bit of questions coming in. Will there be any chances of overnight collapse in value of companies' assets, etc., since it is linked to crypto? I'm not entirely sure about the question here, but to our panelists, if you have any idea about it, will there be any chances of overnight collapse in values of companies?
So I would just say, I guess we saw Bear and Lehman in 2008. It's certainly possible, but I would need more context around this question and what the person's referring to.
Yeah, I think on that note, we are a little bit over time. So if you have any questions, you have my email ID, which would be the Zoom ID that you received your invites on. You can always email us there and we will find a way to answer it. Okay, there is one question I think that both of you might enjoy. Someone has asked, when will the two of you be available in the metaverse and where can they find you?
Yes. If they want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'd be more than happy to allow them to have my spatial link where they would sign up for spatial and then we could communicate through there. And lovely if they reviewed all of our NFTs. And we'll be actually going live on my platform, dripshop.live, not too far away. So cross our fingers. Very excited about that. Hopefully everybody here can get involved in that. And that would be exciting too. But yes, very open to that.
Erin, I think you mentioned you have another event as well, right, with the US Open.
Yeah, there's a Grey Goose event on Decentraland with the US Open that's happening today. I'm a huge sports fan that I want to take a look at. I already moseyed about in there and they actually have the goose and you can do trivia and it looks really fun and cool. So I'll be in there later checking that out. But like Randy said, I'm an open communicator. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, happy to have conversations.
Okay, with that, we are going to close off the session for today. Thank you so much for attending. And thank you, Erin and Randy, for your incredible insights, for answering all the many questions. By the way, these are the most number of questions we've ever had on webinars. We had nearly 12 to 13 questions. I've never seen the audience so engaged in a topic.
Awesome.
So thank you so much. I love hearing from you, and I'm excited to see what the two of you will be up to soon. Thank you again, and hope you have a great rest of the week.
Rebecca, thank you. Randy, lovely to chat with you.
Pleasure. Bye, everybody. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. And to our attendees, please do fill in our survey form that comes in after the webinar. There's quite a bit of thunder and lightning. I'm not sure if that was heard through Zoom. But please do fill in our survey form and give us ideas for what you'd like to see next on our webinar. We have the next webinar happening on the 14th of September, and we're talking about quiet quitting then. So if anyone's interested, please do sign up. You can check our website out for more information. Thank you again. And if you'd like to check out HackerEarth, I'm putting in the link one more time. So thank you to everyone. Have a great rest of the week. Bye-bye.
Bye now.